Okay, now we're back live. So, all right, I guess I'm gonna have to connect just like anything else. You gotta roll with the punches. So, what I was saying is, you have the scenario where people that are doing the open houses are doing it more for selfish reasons, from a real estate agent aspect, rather than really truly helping the sellers. There are specific times where I believe a open house will really help. Houses that are a little quirky, a little weird, a little difficult to sell, it helps because you can build it up in an artificial hype, get a lot of people clustered in at the same time,
Right, right.
and make them feel like it's a hotter commodity than what it really is. But you have to time it right and you have to do it right from that point of view. Um, you also have to uh, put yourself in a scenario where um, in the situation where you have a very short, limited amount of time where you could actually show the place. You might have to do the open houses just for the reason that you don't have a lot of time. Somebody has to move out of the state, out of the country. They have to do something along those lines.
How do you really know that the person that is selling the house is the real owner? I've heard stories of people's identity has been stolen, and
Well,
they left the house and came back, and they can't get it because somebody else is selling the house.
well,
But how you
the
can tell when they switch the deed and put their name on it, doesn't all of that have a trace and people could see who the original owner was and is his signature matching up and all that kind of stuff?
things like that do happen.
Right.
But as a real estate professional,
Uh,
you need to know what you're doing.
oh, okay.
Okay, so the first thing is just because somebody tells you their name
Right.
and then and they say how much you sell the house. First of all, you got to find out is that person's name really on the title? Is it in public records? Are they the true
Right.
owner?
Right.
Another thing that's really cool these days, as far as being able to do, is you have people that have their phone numbers that show up. You can see who that phone number is registered to.
Oh, okay.
So if they tell you my name is Trevor, and
Phone number.
the number shows Bianca,
Right. Okay.
who the hell is Bianca? You got what I'm saying?
Right.
Now, if the last name is the same,
Right.
then you start to make the connection and that kind of thing. But you have to be very careful about those things.
Yeah. I've heard people tell some stories like that. Horrible stories, man. And the people stole. I mean, I actually a few weeks ago got my identity stolen.
Oh
Somebody
no.
went and filed unemployment in my name. The two catches to the whole problem was that they couldn't spell the first name right, and secondly, they got me down as a female.
Wonderful.
So when I went into the office on a job, they said, "Well, we know you didn't apply for it because you said your old name."
So when I was making that example of your phone number showing up under a female's name, it came close to home.
Right. Yeah.
So you have to be careful with these
Yeah.
things, and that falls directly on the real estate agent. Now, listen, if somebody gives you a fake identity
Right. Right.
and somebody pretends to be somebody else, you know, what are you going to do? You go into somebody's house, they open up the door for you, they tell you their name,
Right.
you look them up in the public records.
Right.
What else are you going to do for that? You can't ask people for their birth certificates. If they're coming to, you could,
Good. Right.
but it's going to start getting, it's going to start getting a little bit
Personal.
dicey,
Right.
a little personal. But you don't trust me? I just had you come to my house to sell my house, and you're questioning if I'm really me? You have to think of it from that point of view.
I got
So you have to be very careful and
you. Yeah,
very
that's true.
mindful of that. But you're going to do your due diligence. You're going to make sure that the people that are speaking to you, to the best of your knowledge, are really those people. It happened for many times. on the rental process, where you'd have these vacant homes that are either owned by the banks or they're vacant because the owners are absentee and just empty it out. You know, they just never rented it out and they just kept it empty.
Is that true that when a house is up for foreclosure, that the bank really don't want the house?
Absolutely true.
It sit there for months, years, and the bank won't do nothing about it because they really don't want the house.
That is
Why
absolutely
do they
true.
file a foreclosure on people to get the people out of the house? And they don't want the house. They won't work with the person. I don't get it.
Well, you're diving into a topic right now that is very important. Okay, and this is like a whole show in itself. But I'll break it down really simple and really short for you. When banks have loans on properties that are outstanding and the sellers are in default, most of the time, many times, that amount that's owed to the bank doesn't necessarily equate to the same valuation of the house. Let's say you're in a down market, and when the people bought the place, it was a $500,000 house, and you're in a down market, you're in a bad market right now. Let's say the market can't bear more than 450 for it right now. Well, these people bought a FHA loan with 3.5% down on a $500,000 house. It means they got more debt than equity in the house. Yeah. So what happens is now the bank is stuck. They say if we don't work something out with this seller to stay in their house and keep paying, we're going to have to take this house back, and we're going to take a loss. On top of the difference in the actual valuation of the house, you have other things to expect. The bank has to shell out a ton of money in order to foreclose on the place. The process is not like, we file a piece of paper, it's done. They're paying lawyers, they're paying appraisers, they're paying agents to come out and do BPOs on them. They're paying all these different fees. They're paying back taxes that the seller hasn't been paying, or the owner hasn't been paying. Insurance, because if they don't do these things, one tax number one. Well, number one person that could foreclose on your house and you can't do a damn thing about it is Uncle Sam.
They consider it as a lien.
Oh yeah,
Oh, okay.
oh yeah, and that's the lien that takes priority over everything. So if the state or the government or the city or whoever is, holder of that lien takes that property back, guess what? All the secondary liens are done. They get wiped out. They get wiped out. It's not a good scenario. So they're gonna have to keep paying those taxes, even with municipal bills like water bills. You can't mess around.
And
So
you get a hit of you back.
so you have all those expenses plus time. You talk about months and accrued interest of losses. So they don't want to take those houses. They really don't. It's a last resort. Very rarely do. Well, I don't want to say rarely, but occasionally they get a home run where the person has a ton of equity in the house, or the property has gone up in value dramatically since they took the loan on. The homeowner went on hard times, lost their job, whatever the case is, maybe knock on wood died, and they have to take the house back, and they actually make more money than they would have at any other time. Not often though.
Well,
Occasionally, but not often.
there's a court over there in Sumter Boulevard that most people go for foreclosure.
Uh huh.
And you see people getting, I mean, it's so hurtful that these are people's family living in a house. All of a sudden, they're selling their house for the highest bidder. You got to walk in there with a cashier check or whatever it is.
I'm well aware of that
Yeah,
situation.
I know. It's crazy.
And you know what? I've represented plenty of investors
Okay.
and gone to these auctions with them, or I've actually gone for them,
Oh, okay.
represented
Right.
to bid on these properties for
Right.
them.
Right.
Here's a little bit a thing you wouldn't think of.
Okay.
You know that more than half of those properties don't end up getting sold outside of the bank. The bank ends up buying them back at the auction.
Oh, really?
Yep. If it's a bank foreclosure on a lien, the bank has to put it out there for the amount of debt that is owed to them. In many cases, that amount of debt that's owed to them is more than an investor is willing to pay for the property that could actually make something. So let's say, for example, the debt is 450 on that 500,000 value house. By the time that investor buys the place, pays whatever fees they pay, there's not a lot of money left over to make a profit. You know, even if they got $20,000, $30,000 in this world, $20,000, $30,000, they're gonna have to spend that in the improvements on the place or whatever the case. Because that's another thing. A lot of times you see these properties, they get neglected. People that lose their houses don't necessarily leave those houses broom swept for the most part. On the rare occasion, you have people that are embarrassed, they're ashamed of what happened, and they leave the place immaculate. But those are far and few in between as far as the majority of places that you see look like a train wreck.
They're angry.
They're angry. They're destroying things. Even if they don't destroy things, the place needs a good sanitizing and, you know, or they leave all the junk in there.
Right.
Other times they'll leave everything open as they leave. And then people will break in and they'll take the copper or whatever the case is. Or they'll tell people that they know that they just lost their house and the house is vacant. Sometimes. Or sometimes they'll just go in there and loot the place. You know?
It's harder to get out people that don't own the house because squatted it. And the man, the woman usually own the house, they got to get out there fast. But it's hard for them to get out a squatter in there. It's easy to get out the home. I don't get it.
Well, that's the other part of the equation that we didn't jump into.
Right.
Another reason why the bank is not really particularly fond of foreclosing on the places is many times those owners are not willing to move out voluntarily. And sometimes they won't even do it for cash for keys. Because you have cash for keys scenarios where the bank says, listen, we'll give you 5, 10 grand, 20 grand, get out. They take it and leave. That doesn't happen every time. And that's the best case scenario for them. Especially in a place like here in New York, where it's like impossible to get anybody out of your house. Within full right. They could sit on that house for a year. They could drag it out for years in eviction courts.
You got to still get them lights, you got to get them water, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, certain parts of it. Certain parts of it. You know. Electric, probably not.
Yeah.
You know, because the bank is not going to turn the meters on until they take possession of the place. But the water, you better believe it. Insurance, you better believe it.
Right. Crazy though.
Well, it's not a good scenario. So that whole notion and idea that banks want to foreclose on places, it's not true. It's not true. And I take it from me. I actually am a lot more knowledgeable about this than your average agent or person that does this, because I actually deal with the banks directly on a lot of occasions. I do a lot of foreclosure work, REO work. I'm one of the certified people in the area that they call up to run BPOs, which are broker price opinions. It's basically the real estate professional equivalent to an appraisal, and sometimes they'll even take that into more consideration, depending on how much of a relationship you have with the bank. You know, a lot of times, many times, after we do our assessments, they're trying to make it work and keep the people in there. I could do 100 of these reports and be brought in to investigate some properties, and maybe 5-10% of them actually go into foreclosure. And then here's another scenario that a lot of people don't understand. They don't want to have a lot of houses hit the market in the foreclosure market at the same time. One of the biggest problems we had when we were in 2008 going to 2009, when we had that flood of houses being foreclosed on, was the banks didn't want to release all those foreclosures on the market at the same time. Because what happened in the areas that they did that to, it destroyed the values, at least for them. I'll give you a good. Are you familiar with Corona, New York? Okay, so Corona, New York is a hot area right now. People are spending money buying places there, developing that area. During those years of 2008 to 2012, I want to say that 3 to 4 year window, you had places that were done. They were begging people. You had blocks where you had multiple houses, sometimes in a row, that were foreclosed on, and the banks couldn't get rid of them. They flooded that market. What happened was a lot of investors went in there and they basically bought a lot of places, pennies on the dollar. You
So
know,
you give the landlord, the owner, a certain amount of money just to buy it out.
absolutely. Well, not only that, they were already vacated.
Okay.
They were just destroyed. You know, but even a destroyed. I'll give you a scenario. These are things that I dealt with and I made
Okay.
sales on myself. Yeah, two family houses selling in the high ones and mid 200s for a two family house. I don't care if it's a shell or if it's just a property. What are you going to find that in Corona, New York, at those prices? And that's just one area. You know, other areas, St. Albans was another area. That's where you're from, St. Albans, right?
I'm from St. Albans, yeah.
Yeah, tons. We had tons in that area. Jamaica, South Jamaica, South Jamaica. Oh, you know, you,
I was living Black Jamaican with the baby.
that might be true, but I'll tell you something. There were people that did quite well for themselves buying up all those houses for $150,000 a piece back then.
The houses where the real houses like in Jamaica is when you go to Kimberlite or Lawrence. Them people, they got big houses. And I mean, the communities, they got drugstores, supermarkets, you name it.
Yeah,
And they got it in the neighborhood. And the people live in very nice little.
no, I'm talking about deep South Jamaica,
Oh no.
inside the industrial areas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The places are kind of scary. You know, I would go there at nighttime, and a lot of times I'm not a small guy. So I would go there a lot of times dressed up. Don't look at me now with my sweats and I'm being casual today. But I'll go there with my suit,
Right.
and they think I'm either a narc or a banker going there to foreclose on somebody.
Oh, okay.
So what does that make me? It makes me a target.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. But I do know in Jamaica now, it's almost like Manhattan. When I go through there, I mean, they got tall, special buildings.
North Jamaica.
Yeah, right over there with the Long Island Railroad, it's all over there. These big buildings, hotels, all apartments over there. I mean, it's like you live in Manhattan.
North Jamaica is hot.
Yeah, man.
North Jamaica is super hot.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big trend of people that are going to that area all the way up until 94th Avenue.
I know all over the area. Yeah.
Now you're getting deep into the areas I know well.
I went to Jamaica high school, so I know the area.
You know? A lot of people hear me talking about certain areas and stuff like that, and they just say I'm reading statistics or something like that. I actually have personal experience in a lot of these areas. I'm one of these rare breeds that actually have done work in the majority of Long Island and Queens and Brooklyn. These areas I know very, very
I
well.
know Brooklyn is nice, but I wouldn't want to live there either. Not because of the dealing with crime. You can find crime anywhere you look hard at that. It's just the idea of for me is just basically just the atmosphere that Staten Island, the Bronx, and Brooklyn. I mean, people love those boroughs and stuff like, but it's something about those places I just can't connect with. That's just me.
Well, Well, Brooklyn.
I go through there.
Here's the thing with Brooklyn. Brooklyn has its own. All right, we got into a whole different topic. I'm gonna have to jump onto the rest of the show next week, but I just don't. I want to basically conclude it and give everybody understanding what we're talking about. Brooklyn is its own animal altogether. There, there's a certain vibe. There's a certain feel when you go into Brooklyn. There's a certain swagger of Brooklynites that live there. They take pride in being in Brooklyn. So that's one thing that pulls people in dramatically. Two, you have the convenience factor. You're a skip. You're basically a stone throw away from the city.
Right, that's true.
That's a major thing. Another thing is you get the whole views of the city. Let's say you go to Williamsburg or something like that,
Right, that's true.
but you don't have to be in the city.
Right.
That's one of the reasons why the opposite side of where Queens is, like you don't really get a lot of that in St. Albans. But if you go to Long Island City, Astoria, Woodside, Sunnyside, you get those views. You get that close proximity, and that's why those areas went through. You know, they went on fire basically as far as the values are concerned. Jackson Heights, Elmhurst. You know, I grew up in Jackson Heights. Before I moved to Astoria as a little kid, my first home up until I was, I don't even remember, 10, 11 years old, right around there, I lived in Jackson Heights. It wasn't a nice place. I lived, how did you know? 74th Street, actually, yeah. Oh, yeah. How did you hit that on target? I don't think I've ever said that. I don't think I even said that on the air.
No, because I used to work at a place called Youth Activity. I used to do with drug counseling there. I used to work in that area years ago, the early part of 89, 90, all the way up. Yeah.
And the funny thing is, I didn't even live like near Queens Boulevard or anything like that.
Yeah.
I lived in like a more residential pocket on 74th on 31st Avenue. So it was like, you know, it was kind of like, but the stuff that would go on at nighttime, the things you would hear in the background, not so nice. When you would go to the supermarket, you see crack vials on the parking lot, not so nice.
We used to have a welfare office over there, something Boulevard was terrible. You couldn't walk out there.
Oh, they cleaned up something Boulevard dramatically. They changed up a lot of things. They definitely did. But we definitely went over today, and I don't want to take the time away from your advertisers and whoever's coming after me next. So I'm going to sign off now. Thank you all for listening. Have a great week. Make a lot of money real estate, and we will definitely continue this conversation next week. Thank you, and see you next Monday.